So Felipe Massa is trying to sue Formula One management, the FIA and Bernie Ecclestone for the 2008 Formula One World Championship. And the response from Formula One is pure gold dust, so let's get into it. So first of all, let's quickly get over what Massa actually wants, because he's not saying that he wants the championship taken away from Lewis Hamilton and given to himself. Massa is simply requesting monetary compensation for what he feels was a championship that was robbed from him. And Felipe Massa feels that the appropriate amount would be 64 million Great British pounds. So why does he feel like he was robbed? For those of you that don't know, I'll quickly cover off the crashgate scandal from the Singapore Grand Prix of 2008. In a nutshell, the Renault Formula One team had not won a race for a few years, and they come up with this genius idea to have Nelson Piquet Jr. crash, cause a safety car with a very convenient pit stop time for Fernando Alonso, meaning that he would come out ahead of the pack and lead the race until the end, which he did. The genius behind this decision was none other than Flavio Briatore, who was handed a lifetime ban for his involvement with this incident, but somehow, of course, he is now back in the world of Formula One. So what does this have to do with Felipe Massa? Well, basically, during that race, he had a very poor pit stop. Essentially, Massa pulled away from his pit stop with the fuel hose still attached to the car. I'll get a photo of it up on the screen there, which the team then had to run down the pit lane, get him back, get the fuel hose sorted before he could then go back and rejoin the race. This all ended up with Felipe Massa finishing down in 13th position, obviously scoring no points. Lewis Hamilton, on the other hand, Massa's title rival, finished in P3, which scored him 6 points. And when the championship came down to a single point at the end of the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2008, Felipe Massa is claiming that the events of the 2008 Grand Prix should be completely invalidated, meaning that nobody scored any points, which would mean that Lewis never scored those 6 points, so Felipe Massa would then have won the championship by 5 points. And honestly, I've got to say, if I was Felipe Massa, I can completely understand where he's coming from here. And if you're wondering why Felipe Massa has waited almost 20 years to bring this to the courts, it's all because of a throwaway comment that Bernie Ecclestone made in 2023, where basically Bernie was attempting to sort of discredit Lewis Hamilton's 2008 championship because Bernie's very much not a fan of Lewis Hamilton. So Crashgate was investigated in 2009, 1 year after the event. But of course, there was a lot of repercussions for Renault and for Flavio Briatore and Nelson Piquet Jr. But the results of that Grand Prix stood, and Fernando Alonso is still the winner of that Grand Prix. But in 2023, Bernie Ecclestone said, "We had enough information at the time to investigate the matter. According to the statutes, we should have cancelled the race for the Singapore Grand Prix under these conditions. This means it would have never happened for the championship standings, and Felipe Massa would have become world champion, not Lewis Hamilton." But in true Bernie Ecclestone fashion, he now claims that he doesn't remember saying that. This was an interview I gave to someone in Germany, and the guy at the time, his English wasn't that good, and he was taking notes, and it was picked up by somebody in England. This is a classic case of one man's word against another, so of course we'll never truly know what happened. But it was reported that Ecclestone told F1 Insider that both he and then FIA President Max Mosley knew about the Crashgate scandal in 2008, but he wanted to save Formula One from a huge scandal, so he sort of swept it under the rug, told Nelson Piquet not to come forward. So of course, if you're Felipe Massa, seeing these comments being made years later, you feel right to be aggrieved. Now here's where things get a little bit spicy. So Felipe Massa's lawyer claims that Mr. Massa has a real prospect of succeeding on all of the grounds, adding that whether the FIA breached its duties is a fact-sensitive issue on which the court should not conduct a mini-trial. Now, I am no legal expert, it won't surprise you to learn that I am not a lawyer, so I can only go off the information that's being presented to me. But where things get really interesting is the response from the Formula One lawyer team. So on Wednesday, lawyers for the defendants said that Massa performed poorly in the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, which ultimately led to him losing the championship, and then added that the claim has been brought too late, suggesting that Massa should have brought this up in 2008, 2009, but of course at that time he wasn't aware of what Bernie Ecclestone knew, and Max Mosley of course. The lawyers for Formula One continued, "In truth, it was not the deployment of the safety car which changed the course of history for Mr. Massa, but rather a series of subsequent racing errors by him and his team during the remaining 47 laps of the race, and the simple fact is that over the course of both the Singapore Grand Prix and the whole of the 2008 season, Mr. Hamilton outperformed Mr. Massa and everybody else." With Bernie Ecclestone's lawyer adding that this would deprive Mr. Hamilton of his 2008 title. So I think this is where it gets really interesting, right? Because obviously Felipe Massa is right right to feel aggrieved. If I was in his position, I would absolutely feel like I've been robbed. But it's not Lewis Hamilton's fault. I mean, Lewis Hamilton was in the same race that crashgate happened. Lewis just happened to finish better. And this is the tricky thing about sport, isn't it? Because I think we have a tendency to say, oh, the championship was won or lost on one certain event. If you take a look at Abu Dhabi 21, for example, of course, the human error champion, FIA hates Lewis Hamilton, all of these things that people say, when in reality, a championship battle is fought and won across a whole season. And both Lewis and Max drove fantastic that year, just as Lewis and Massa fought fantastically in 2008. And you could just as easily argue that the 2021 championship was decided when Lewis Hamilton left his brake magic on and went wide at turn 1 in Baku, or when he had a crash in Imola causing the red flag. Obviously, with Abu Dhabi being the final race of the year and with it ending the way that it ended, obviously people are going to be saying that that's what decided the championship. But a Formula 1 season is 22, 23, 24 races long. It's not one single event. And the same for 2008. It wasn't the Singapore Grand Prix, and that's the entire season. I did also make a video about this on my TikTok page. If you guys are on TikTok, come and give me a follow. And I've seen a lot of people saying that this sort of sours Felipe Massa's reputation in the world of Formula 1, because I think he's remembered quite fondly. A lot of people look back at Massa as this sort of champion that never was. And the way that he handled himself on the podium in the Brazilian Grand Prix in 2008 was honestly fantastic. He showed so much grace, so much like mental strength, because it could have been easy for him to just throw his toys out the pram, but he didn't. He was very proud on that podium, and as he should be, he put up a fantastic fight that year. But I've seen some people in my comments saying that Massa kind of looks desperate from doing this, and it makes him look like a bit of a sore loser, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think that is a little bit unfair, because he absolutely has the right to feel the way that he does. But let me know your thoughts on this in the comments, guys. If you're new, hi, I'm Chris, GP Racing on TikTok and on YouTube. Feel free to give me a subscribe, follow me on TikTok, like, share, comment, all that good stuff. And let me know, do you think that Felipe Massa is clutching at straws here? Do you think he has a right to be aggrieved? And do you think this court case is going to go anywhere? Because if Massa does end up winning a monetary compensation for this, I think that does open the door for a lot of previous controversies in Formula 1 to be brought back up. And before you know it, Lewis Hamilton will be trying to sue Michael Massey for Abu Dhabi 21. Not that Lewis really needs the money. I'm sure Ferrari are keeping him very, very well fed. And thank you guys for watching. I'll see you all in the next one.